person with his thought attuned by constant practice and not wandering after anything else, he or Partha reaches the person supreme and divine. The word abhyasa yoga yuktena, by constant practice, is a technical word in the Gita that we must understand. What is abhyasa yoga by practice? The Lord said 3 things about practice in the last few verses. Firstly, in the 6th verse, the Supreme Soul said, Sada tad bhava bhavitaha, being ever absorbed in the thought of God and always being coloured in the colour of God. This is the first requirement of abhyasa yoga by practice. Secondly, in the 7th verse, the Supreme Soul said, Mai arpitam mano buddhihi, set your mind and intellect on me. This is a very necessary thing in abhyasa yoga by practice. The third requirement of abhyasa yoga by practice, is described by God in this verse as Nanya Gamena Chetasa, with his thought not wandering after anything else. When these 3 things combine, then you get this. In anything in life, you have to do practice for it. If you look at everything since childhood, then you cannot do anything without practice. As soon as a child starts crying when it is born, then it is practicing how to breathe. That is why the child's life is going to last. If there is just a newborn baby, then it does not know anything, because when it was in its mother's womb, then all the arrangements had been made. It was connected to its mother through an umbilical cord, and therefore it had no worries about eating, drinking, breathing, or any other type of worry. Now, when it took birth and became separated from its mother, the milk that it has to suck from its mother's breasts also requires practice. Slowly and slowly as it grows up, then it has had practice how to eat light foods, such as smashed bananas, light grains, khichdi, rices and pulses, etc. This is practice. Slowly and slowly, the child forms a habit of digestion, and when it goes forward, then it can eat peppers, spices, and unfortunately junk food. All of this happens by itself, but it does not happen from the beginning. This is practice. This is practice in a very small thing. Practice is needed in each and everything. If you want to achieve success in your studies, then you have to have practice. If you want to earn money, then you should have practice. Make somebody, a godfather, sit in their office, see what they're doing in their line, and how everything works, then you can go ahead. If there is practice in each and everything, then do we not need practice in remembering God? You will need practice, and you should practice it from a young age. A person makes so much efforts to earn £5,000 or £10,000. For the whole month, the poor person hangs onto a train at 7 o'clock in the morning, comes out at 9:30 in the morning, goes running into the office at 10 a.m. to get him signed out by the master, and works hard and labours until 6 p.m. and goes hanging back on the train on the way home. Look how much effort is put into this. And at the end of the month, he will get his £8,000 or £10,000. He worked so hard for a month to get £8,000 or £10,000 at the end of the month, but this money will run out in around 10 days, and he has to go out and earn money again. He works so hard, practices so much, and makes so much efforts to earn money that it will get used up in 8 to 10 days. If a person makes even a tenth of this much effort in order to attain the Supreme Soul, then he will certainly attain the Lord. But people do not make efforts for this. Even practice is required for this. Worldly wealth is necessary. I'm not saying that you should not make efforts for this, because you have to make efforts for worldly wealth. This worldly wealth that you're making efforts for is going to run out one day, whereas on the other hand, the wealth of remembering the Lord is imperishable. Mira says, Rama Ratan Dhanapayo, Bayoji Mene Rama Ratan Dhanapayo. I got a jewel like the name of Sri Ram. Oh dear, I got a jewel like the name of Sri Ram. This is the wealth. The little wealth that we are earning is going to keep on running out again. On the other hand, the wealth in a form of remembering God is imperishable. It never runs out. After earning wealth in the form of money, what will you get? Enjoyments and pleasures, some erect facilities, etc. On the other hand, after earning wealth in the form of remembering the Supreme Soul, one attains the Supreme Soul himself. One attains the Lord himself. This is abhyasa yoga by constant practice. Secondly, in abhyasa yoga by constant practice, what does the word yoga mean? comes from the word yuktena, to join. The word yog also means to join, but this person became joined through yog, union. He is constantly and eternally joined with the Supreme Soul. If there is a medicine for disease, then you have to constantly take it. If the doctor has given a dose of medicine, and you keep taking little by little every day, then the medicine will cure the illness. If you take an appointment with the doctor once, have the medicines prescribed, and put the medicines in your house, and have an appointment with the doctor in 10 days, then we drink all the bottles of medicine in one go before we go to the doctor. If we do this, then will the disease be healed? No, it will not. You should take one medicine or the other every day. In the same way, we have come from God over here, and we all have the medicines and goods over here, such as the Srimad Bhagavad, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, the Ramayana, the Upanishads. We have placed all of these bottles of medicine in the world in each and every person's house. But if one only starts chanting the name of Ram when he turns 80, and the doctor's appointment is coming up, and drinks all the medicines in one go, then this has no meaning. Each and every day you should drink little by little medicine. Not only that, but if you begin drinking this medicine every day, then if you have drunk this medicine for 2 to 4 days, and it tastes nice, then you should continue drinking this medicine. Many people have a habit when they drink it for 2 to 4 days and it feels nice, so they give it up and they say they don't want any more medicine. They give up the medicine. This would also not work. In the same way, if we fall into good company and get some good thoughts so that we live a good life and see the consequences of this, then it may be the case that you see other people do not do this, where you listen to this 2 hours a day. Then you may think that there is no need for this because there is nobody as good as you, so you give it up. This will also not work. You should continue doing it perpetually in order to escape from this disease. Abhyasa Yoga, yoga by constant practice, should be kept running until one's last breath at the time of death. That is why God uses words such as Sada Sarveshu Kaleshu. Remember me at all times, over and over again. This is Abhyas Yoga, yoga by constant practice. Srimad Adi Shankaracharya Ji defines Abhyas constant practice as Maichita Samarpan Vishya Bhute Ekasmin Tulya Pratyaya Vruti Lakshmana Vilakshan Pratyaya Anand Taritya Abhyasaha. Meaning, doing one thing over and over and over again, and says that in the same way, what Shri Krishna is trying to say here is that the flow of the same ideas in regard to me. Through this Abhyas Yoga, yoga by constant practice, one becomes joined with the Supreme Soul. Shri Krishna also says that the mind should not wander after anything else. The biggest illness of the mind is that the mind keeps wandering after other things, and when the mind wanders after other things, then it becomes unsteady. I like one story said by the Sufi fakirs. There was a prominent businessman, and this prominent businessman had one daughter. She had a very beautiful appearance. She reached 22 or 23 years of age, and talk about her wedding began. When the daughter like this was going to be married, and as soon as the news reached society, then many suitors came from her. Men from all the nicest houses, wealthy men, educated men, handsome men lined up for her. Both the father and the daughter got confused about what they should do because they had got so many nice proposals. Both of them sat down together and decided a short list of all the suitors. She found something wrong in one boy and another. Eventually, the short list went down to 3 boys. These 3 boys were good in every way. They were handsome, from good families, from prestigious families, wealthy, intelligent, and everything was the same about these 3 boys. They could not decide what to do. These 3 boys found out that they had been shortlisted. They said that one out of these 3 was going to be the luckiest because he would get to marry this girl. They kept thinking in their minds that they would be married to her. All 3 of them fell in love with this girl with their minds. The decision was not yet taken, and all of a sudden an unexpected event occurred that the girl got ill and died. Under Muslim rules, she was being put in a coffin because she had died. This had such a big knock on those boys because they thought that she was so beautiful that they had all fallen in love with her in their minds. They thought about what they should do. One of these 3 boys decided that there is nobody else for him in the world, and that if he married the girl, then he would have served her father. He thought about where her father would go, because she was his one daughter, and therefore there would now be nobody to look after her father. He thought that after getting married he would serve the girl's father, and therefore he decided to serve the girl's father. This boy began to serve the girl's father. The second boy thought that there was no use of living in the material world, and that if he had married this girl, then it would be something different, but now the material world is not worth living in, and therefore this boy left the material world to join a group of Sufi saints. He became involved with them. For the third boy, nothing could make him happy, and day and night he would sit by the grave in which the girl's body was put. Tears kept flowing from his eyes. He would not move from there. He would not eat, drink, or do anything else. He would just sit by the girl's grave. 6 to 7 months passed, and the boy who had gone with the fakirs came in touch with the saint, and he had acquired knowledge and the mantra from the saint through which he could make a person who had passed away come alive again. He acquired such a mantra. He attained this knowledge. As soon as he acquired this knowledge, then he came running, because he had only one person he wanted to make alive again. He stood in the cemetery of his town and went where the girl he loved was buried and chanted the mantra. Suddenly, the girl awakened, came back to life, and stood in front of him. Once again, the question came to her who she would get married to. She was alive now, and therefore she had decided who she would get married to. The father told his daughter that he could not decide, and therefore she should decide that whoever she chooses, whoever she chooses would get married to him. The daughter told her father about her decision, that father, after my death, the boy that looked after you is like my brother, because he served you just like I would serve you. The boy who gave me another life is just like my father, because he was the one who gave birth to me. But the boy who, without thinking of anything else, sat beside my coffin, crying about me, is the boy who I want to marry, because I did not go away from his mind. He never forgot me. The other two boys tried to make me forget about them. They may have tried to forget me in a good way, and may have made enlightened efforts. They do not try to forget about me through intoxication or addiction, but they tried to forget about me in a good way, but they made efforts to forget me, for example, in serving you or in becoming a Sufi saint. On the other hand, this third boy just sat by the coffin and could not forget me. I will marry him. Shri Krishna says in this verse that one should not have their mind wandering about anything else. There is a good example of this when one's mind does not believe in the Supreme Soul and wanders anywhere else. When a person performs such a abhyas yoga by constant practice, then he reaches the person supreme and divine. How can this be achieved? Shri Krishna says in this verse that it can be achieved by meditating on the Supreme with a thought attuned by constant practice. The word used by Shri Krishna is anuchintayan. What does anuchintayan mean? Shankaracharya ji says that two things are needed for anuchintayan, and these are Shastacharyo Upadesham Anudhyayam, contemplating on the instructions of the scriptures and the great teachers. Contemplating on the instructions of the scriptures and the great teachers. This is anuchintayan. The reason why we should meditate on what the scriptures say is that for thousands of years of traditions, our great rishis have presented us with this market purified butter, and we should think about their instructions. This is anuchintayan. The rishis have not said anything for themselves. Often people ask the question of why we should read the scriptures, because they were written so many years ago, and therefore we should not read them today. Make one thing certain in your minds. The scriptures were written with a feeling of selflessness, and that is why it is said with a feeling of selflessness. That which is said with a feeling of selflessness is always the ultimate truth. No rishi ever put his signature on a scripture. There was no selflessness of any rishi in any of the scriptures. They do not want any royalties or any salary, or had no type of expectation at all. No rishi has never left a throne for himself and said that his son will sit on that throne after he goes. No rishi who has written one of the ancient scriptures has ever done this. No rishi ever had any investment in any scripture. The scripture was written with one thing in mind, and that was just to give. Our rishis wrote the scriptures for the welfare of society, so that good can happen to society. Anything that is said with the attitude of selflessness can only be good. When does contamination come? When there is some kind of expectation that something good is going to happen to me, and something bad can happen to the other person, or good things happen to me, and less good things will happen to the other person. When those feelings of duality arise, then this is where difficulties happen. This is where opinions and suggestions become coloured or tainted. That is why we should contemplate on the instructions of the scriptures. We should also meditate on the instructions of the acharyas, great teachers. If a pupil wishes to attain instructions from his guru, or to learn something from his guru, then the pupil should have patience from this. I often say that today that there are many teachers, but there are very few gurus. There is a difference between a teacher and a guru. You can tell a teacher to teach you something and to tell you something, but you cannot tell this to a guru. Of course, you can have curiosity and ask questions, but it is up to the guru on whether to give the answer to this and how to give the answer to this. It is described in our scriptures that whenever people would be entering a guru's hermitage system or ashram, holy residence, to ask a guru questions, then first of all, the guru would say, Samvad Sarvam Sarvat Yatha. If you want the answer to your question, then stay here for 1 year. When a pupil would stay in the pure atmosphere and ashram, holy residence, with a guru for 1 year and sees what's going on, then it's even possible that the question of the pupil will go away within that 1 year. There was such an event in Buddha's life. Around Buddha, there was Anand, who was his younger brother and one of his key disciples, and some other disciples. A person came there. Each and every great saint has said the same thing. This person came, and as soon as Buddha's discourse finished, then this person asked Buddha a question based on something that Buddha had said during his discourse. Just from the manner in which the person had asked the question, Buddha realized that this question is not being asked in order to attain something, but in order to measure Buddha. Many people ask questions in order to measure the speaker. Buddha realized this. Buddha said, I'll give you the answer to your question, but you will have to stay with me for a year. The person got ready because he had asked the question in front of everyone, and therefore he said that, no, I do not want to stay. If he said, I don't want to stay with you, then everyone would think that he just asked the question for the sake of asking a question. Buddha told him that if he really wanted to know the answer to the question, he should stay with Buddha for a year. The person said, fine, I'll stay with you for a year. As soon as the person said he would stay with the Buddha for a year, then Buddha's 4 to 5 disciples began laughing very loudly. The person looked at the disciple, and Buddha told him, do you think then I will not be able to stay for 1 year? I will certainly be able to stay for 1 year, and I will only leave after knowing the answer to the question. I'll count until it's 1 year, and exactly after 1 year, I'll ask Buddha what the answer to the question is. The disciple began laughing even louder. The person asked the disciple why he was laughing. At that time, the disciple said, I also came here like this, and Buddha also told me to stay with him for 1 year, and in that 1 year where I stayed with Buddha, I did not even know where my questions went away after staying with my guru for 1 year. The cohabitance that is there in staying with a guru and the talks that one hears from a guru results in the questions themselves going away. I feel as if there is nothing else left to ask about. This is the effect of a guru. This is the true guru who is staying with one does not have any questions left to ask. Yet the guru does not give a guarantee. If a person asks a rishi whether he will give the person the answer to his question after a year, then what the rishi says is that at least stay for 1 year, and then yadi vignasaha dahi kate shamaha. If we know the answer to your question, then we will tell you. The meaning of this is that the guru or rishi does not have the egotism that he will know the answer to the question. They tell the person to stay there for 1 year, and if they know the answer to the question, then they will tell the person. The disciple should have this much patience. The question should not be born just from curiosity. The question should be manifest from the churning of the mind. If the majority of questions are asked because the person is churning his mind, then the answer will come by itself. This is anuchintayan, contemplating on the Supreme Person. It is to think, to meditate, and to contemplate. What do we perform anuchintayan of? You can perform anuchintayan of something which you have experienced before. If you have a study of something before or experience of something before, then you can perform anuchintayan of it. Continue seriously thinking about it. If you had not got experience of something, then how can you perform Anujintayan of it? If you want to perform Anujintayan of Brahman, or Anujintayan of the Supreme Soul, then do you have experience of the Supreme Soul? Who do we remember? Who do we perform Anujintayan of? Who do we think about? Something which we have experience of before. In the Bridhanyak Upanishad, Yajnavalkya says, Atmava are drashyato shrutavyo mantavyo nitya siddhavyaha. The soul should be seen, heard and thought about. The first word said after Atmave are, the soul should be, is drashtavyo, to see. This is a very important order. Seen, heard and thought about. This is because while you have not seen the soul, then what difference will it make to you if you have not heard about, if you hear about it? It would be a waste. If I were to take a simple example, then if you have not seen the food of eggplant, then if someone is sitting there talking about eggplant and describing eggplant, because we have not seen it, nor have we smelled it, nor do we know what it looks like, how can we get the taste of eggplant? How can we know about the greatness of eggplant? How can we know about the sweetness of eggplant? We cannot. In the same way, if one has not got experience of the Supreme Soul, then no matter how much they hear about the Supreme Soul, it will have no meaning. That is why the Upanishads say that we should see the soul first. It says further in the same mantra that Atmanova are darshanena shavadnena matya vignanenam sarvam viditam. One can get wisdom of the soul when they see the soul, listen to the soul, and then think about the soul. Then one can be concentrated on the soul. One can get wisdom of the soul when they see the soul, listen to the soul, and then think about the soul. Then one can be concentrated on the soul. The word darshanena, see, comes first after atmaneva are, to show that to get wisdom of the soul, one must first see the soul. One should see the Supreme Soul first. If you listen to a lot of bhajans, devotional songs, and pravachans, holy discourses, but nothing happens, then this is because it is listening without seeing. That is why it is not happening. If it is listening after seeing, then it will certainly have an effect. Then one can remember God. You may be thinking that I am talking after seeing the soul, but how can you see the soul? We hear that some people have seen the soul through someone else, but how can we see the soul without this person? The scriptures say that the soul, the Supreme Soul, or the truth of Brahman, is laid out in the world around us. He is too much around us. Through his form with qualities, this formless truth without qualities is in the world. We should see this truth. We should see the Supreme Soul residing in each and every atom of the world. I often say that you should see the Supreme Soul in a blooming flower. You should see the Supreme Soul in the rising sun. You should see the Supreme Soul in the setting sun. You should see the Supreme Soul in a flowing river. You should see the Supreme Soul in the full moon and also in the dark moon. When the moving wind touches you, you should feel as if the Supreme Soul is touching you. A great saint has said a very nice thing. A person went to a saint and told him that he doesn't believe in God and he does not do this and that. He came from somewhere far and was covered with sweat. The great saint asked the person whether he wishes to experience the soul, and the person replied, yes. If you can do it, then I want to do it. The great saint told a person, you look like you have come from far away, and the person replied, yes. The great saint asked the person to take his shirt off. The person asked, I want to experience God. Why are you asking me to take my shirt off? He was shy at first because there were 15 people around him. The great saint asked him, why? You want to experience the Supreme Soul and you're not even ready to do this. I'm not asking you for doing anything else. I'm just telling you to take off your shirt. The person took off his shirt with his hand shivering. He was thinking about what this great saint would say. He took off his shirt and put it to one side. He felt a brush of the cool air, and when the cool air touched his skin, then the great saint asked him how it felt. The person said, I can feel the air and it feels very nice. The great saint said, this is the Supreme Soul. In that one brush of air, in each and every atom in your air, did you see the Supreme Soul? Where did this coolness come from? And in order to clarify, the great saint said to him, if you had not taken off your shirt, then would the air not be exactly the same or not? The person said that the air would have been the same. The great saint then said, but would you have experienced it? The person said no, because the shirt was there before. I would not have had much coolness as I did when the air touched my skin. The great saint said, you are sitting there wearing the shirt of your ego, and your ignorance and the air of the Supreme Soul is coming around you. You are not able to touch it, and you're not able to feel it. You have to take off this covering of yours. Do not think that having darshan of seeing the Supreme Soul is something that only a few people of high qualifications can do. Years and years of penances are good and necessary, and I'm not talking about the futility of them, because they are very necessary, but in day-to-day life, in the most simplest of lives, one can experience the touch of the Lord, and one can remember the Lord. Only thereafter can one listen to the Lord. Therefore, one should see the form of the Lord with qualities pervading the world as a formless truth without qualities. One who does this performs anuchintaya. What happens to such a person? Shri Krishna says that she reaches a person with a capital P, supreme and divine. Srimad Ramanujacharya, while interpreting this part of the verse in his commentary, says that what happens when the devotee reaches the person supreme and divine is that matsamana karo bhavati. He attains a form similar to that of the Supreme Soul. The devotee becomes like the Supreme Soul. One becomes like that which he thinks about. Today in society, what do people think about? What do people in society keep thinking about constantly? A poet has said it very nicely that Have to kaski darpan thaya yuvan ne ek bar arpan, fak chori ne chariya tore shankar baki che, yuvan nichar rakvari sheet par var na gucha, fak na chuk bage chanchar taro chanchar ke baki che. When you walk behind two youths, then you will not be able to tell who is a boy and who is a girl, because both have the same hair. Boys have grown their hair longer and girls have cut their hair shorter, therefore both have become the same. Now boys just have to wear anklets near their feet and they will become completely similar. What do people in society keep thinking about, and what is the goal of people in society? In ancient times, what happened was that the rishis were the ideals. That is why the stories that came in the Vedas on the majority are about the rishis. After that, the time came when the kings became the ideals of society. The kings that attacked and fought wars became the ideals. For example, stories of Indra became popular. Why? Indra means god of the gods. He was the king of the gods and had a lot of impact. He fought so many wars and killed so many demons. Stories of him came. Then at the time of the Daneshvari, great donators came. First you had the time of the Brahmins, then the Kshatriyas, the warriors, and then the Vaishyas. Even stories of the merchants came. But these were not stories of merchants who had gathered money through trading, but those who had donated a lot of money in society, who had used their wealth for good purposes. These stories of merchants became the ideal. Thereafter, the entire Bhagavad tradition came, the devotees tradition came 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, before today, and the devotional sects, sampradayas, arose. During this time, the Shudra, the laborer, became the ideal. Please note that Shudra does not mean useless. Even by mistake, do not think of it as having this meaning. But the Shudra, laborer section of society that was deserving of the other sections of the society, or fulfilling the bodily needs of other sections of society, gave rise to a number of devotees, and stories of them became the ideal. People in the Shudra, laborer section of society could even attain the supreme truth. Stories of them became the ideal. Thereafter, the freedom struggle began, and the struggle of independence began. The freedom fighters and the politicians became our ideals. If Gandhiji wore a loincloth, then with him thousands of people would wear a loincloth. If Nehru wore a pointed hat, then the hat of Nehru would become a fashion item. This is because they were the ideals and the heroes of society. Whatever they did, people would be ready to do the same. If Jawaharlal Nehru placed a rose on his shirt, then many people would place a rose on their shirts. It was the style. People would imitate them. When the freedom struggle finished and India got its independence, then all these politicians went and society changed. Then the sports players became our ideals. The football players, the cricketers, and other sports players became our ideals. Until then it was fine, but in the last 30 years, who have become the ideals of society? Those who dance like crazy, are these our ideals? Because these are ideals, we are seeing what their consequences are. Therefore, Anuchintan is very important. Nar apni karanam kare to narka narayan ho jaye. If a person decides and acts, then he becomes like God. If a person constantly thinks about the Supreme Soul, then you attain the supreme truth and the person who is supreme and divine. If one sees a form of God with qualities, then how is that God described? If we see the supreme soul, then what will that Lord look like? Now, if we wish to listen to the Lord, Shri Krishna describes this in the next verse, which will be covered in the next class. The next class